Welcome to another episode of The Golden Hour. I'm Sharif Yunus here with Dr. Kevin Majors. Kevin, welcome.
Sharif, great to be here.
Well, Kevin, we got a fantastic email from someone who's been using OptimalWork.com, maybe listening to the podcast, probably. And it's a question on basically my favorite topic that I think is the most important, which is the morning and how to spend the morning. So in general, Kevin, how would you rate the morning in terms of importance? I mean, is it really as important as I say?
Exactly. If you ask, an architect, what's the most important part of a building?
Mm-hmm.
The foundation. So the foundation is the most important part. And the morning is really the foundation of the day.
Mm-hmm.
At least I know you believe that, and that's been my experience too.
Yeah. And also just for me, it's been the biggest kind of a huge challenge is getting the morning off to a good start. So it's been a great area for me to kind of challenge myself in and try to grow. Well, without further ado, maybe I can just go ahead and read this question. It's a bit long, but I think it's worthwhile to read the whole thing. So here goes. I work out at night and it helps me sleep, typically 2 to 3 times a week, high intensity and or cardio workouts. The downside of this is that it encourages late nights, and sometimes I don't get enough sleep. I am considering changing up my whole routine to work out in the morning instead. However, because of other family obligations, that would require me to wake up really early, like 5 a.m. That would completely change my evenings as I would need to be in bed by 9 p.m. as well. Would you recommend one scenario over the other? I know your experience at OptimalWork is that morning workouts are particularly beneficial for work. Is changing your sleep schedule beneficial as well? Would you consider 5 a.m. too early? If not, what is too early? Does it depend on every person? Have you heard of the 5 a.m. CEO, and would you recommend such a lifestyle?
That was a great question, wasn't it?
It is. There's a lot to it, so maybe we can kind of break it down a little bit.
Actually, the nice thing about this was that you and I both answered without CCing each other because we received both of them.
Yeah.
And we said the exact same thing.
Yeah.
So
almost
that was
word for word.
Yes. Exactly. It was good. There was no coordination going on at all. But I think it's just such an essential element of our approach at Optimal Work is trying to build the right kind of morning routine. So, and this thing like that the person mentioned of working out in the late nights is sometimes easier because your brain may be fried by the end of the night, especially if you're doing academic work or very tough things in the daytime, crunching things. It's like, oh boy, by the evening, I'm just ready to kind of, a workout. Hey, how about that? The difficulty is working out after 7 p.m. Tends to turn you into a night owl. Conversely, working out before 7 a.m. turns you into a morning lark. That's what, I don't really believe that there are types of people like that, but there are habits. But there have been studies that showed sleep, preferences are changeable, and they're changeable. But exercise and when you do it is one of the things that really influences it hugely. What did you think was about the idea of 5 a.m.? Is that too early?
Well, I always have to battle when I give people advice. I always don't want to be too tough. So my initial thought was, don't worry about it. Just sleep in. But then I said, okay, that's actually bad advice because I wouldn't give it to myself. I wouldn't follow that advice. So in the end, I said, do the earlier one. 5 a.m. is not too early. I think you'll really like that. And then do the workout then as well. And then over time, exactly like you said, like it'll help you to become a morning person. Then you'll also get the benefits of the workout throughout the day. It's a great way to just like start the day off with something difficult like that, because I think if you don't have something challenging, then the most challenging thing is getting out of bed, and then that's where like if you can really challenge yourself with a run, then jumping out of bed becomes easier, I think. So like you're kind of building off of it. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I think that's exactly right. So having a quick succession of challenges in some way makes each of them easier. Because there's one thing and then there's the next thing and the next thing. So having a run right after jumping into bed allows you to be sure you're not going to go back in bed. Yeah, people also say that just delaying making the bed until the end, once they're finally dressed before leaving the bedroom, that is the one other way of guaranteeing they don't end up going back into bed. So, yeah, one challenge after another in the morning is a fantastic way to start. The the question of how early is too early. I remember talking with a resident, at Harvard Med School in psychiatry, who, when he was in medical school, he would wake up at 4 and start studying at 4:30. He would finish studying for the day at 7:30 a.m. because he had several young children and a wife who needed him around. He would go to classes until it'd be like 2 p.m. and then come home and help out. So the whole rest of the day, he was just family time. And he stayed super committed to that, and he never needed to study for med school, you know, besides the 4:30 a.m. to 7:30 a.m. window, which in some cultures is seen as a kind of super window for focus and attention. And it's much better if you have a lot of work to do that you learn to wake up early and make use of that natural window. Probably because the world is so quiet and there are just very few things going on that will steal your attention. But there also is something physiological, that just like your memory imprinting happens more easily in the morning. It's one of the reasons why it's considered in psychiatry better to do exposure therapy earlier in the morning, because early morning exposures seem to make more of an impact. Somehow we're more shapeable in the morning. So, and that's why I think when people try changing their morning routines also, they find that they in fact are much more shapeable than they would have thought. So I've also talked to people, I remember a number of PhD students or candidates that I've helped who are working on their thesis who had young children, who I have advised to try to start your first golden hour as early as you can. 5 a.m. is a great start time, and then finish your day entirely by noon. And they found that made a gigantic impact on their ability to finish their work, that you just try to get it done in the morning. So I think mornings can be super productive. And to see, can you do great golden hours in the morning? And then you've accomplished so much, you have momentum. And the rest of the day, you can then easily stop mid-afternoon, early, before even the early evening, and be able to have relaxed nights.
This might be slightly lower reasons, but like if you do all your studying and your work that's on your own before classes and so forth, those are kind of going to be you're going to have fewer distractions during the classes. If you do the classes and you have a paper or some problem sets coming up, that might be a potential distraction that you would be tending to think about those things and kind of working on them in your head while you're in class. Is that a good rationale?
Yeah, so I think it is easier to having gotten your most important priorities addressed early in the day, just makes you ready for challenge throughout the day. Yeah, without feeling like you're getting pulled different directions all the time. You just don't feel overwhelmed. I have never heard anyone who has learned to really make great use of the morning ever talk about feeling overwhelmed. I think that because they know that the mornings can be so productive and it's a pretty reliable time of day. I know you've made this point before, that it's the time of day when you tend to have the most control over your schedule. That there's just things are unlikely to come up in those very early morning hours. So learning how to get some good work done if you really need to. Now, I also think, and one of the things in OptimalWork we often tell students is it's always better to trade late night hours of working for early morning hours of working. So if you think I have this paper to write, it's due at say 5 p.m. and I'm just gonna pull an all-nighter to write it. I think it's never good to do that because, well, one, you're just not going to produce good quality work without any sleep. But even to stay up to 3 a.m. and then sleep and then wake up and keep working on it, it is much better to get sleep earlier and then wake up very early and start working on it.
Yeah, you get the deadline benefit too,
Yes.
where
Because,
if you're just staying up all night, it's easier to get distracted and then you just stay up a little bit later and okay. But if
yeah,
you wake up early, then okay, this thing has to be finished by 9 a.m.
exactly.
And
There's
that
no
gets you.
deadline to push against. And so you don't get intensity so easily. And then you're more likely to give into compensations like, oh, I deserve a little bit of half rest right now. And so you tend to do that late at night. So you end up
Yeah.
half working and giving in more easily to distractions. Whereas if you just go to bed, sleep, you know that even if you only sleep 5 hours, you're going to have way more energy when you wake up from that.
Yeah. It also, I mean, just psychologically, like I think if you're waking up early, it just has this. You just get this sense that I'm working ahead.
Yeah,
Whereas if you're staying up late, you have this feeling I'm catching up.
exactly.
I don't know how that fits in, but
I think that as a way of life, you always feel even if it's something due that day, well, then you have even more like of the deadline benefit. That there's this immovable deadline that you have to turn in the paper by this time, and so it's much better to be pushing up against an immovable deadline. Provided that you have given yourself basically enough time to work on it. I think there's this is a related question, but how much do we really need to help people with the nighttime if we really help them make good use of the morning? And my experience has always been that maybe it's just so much easier to help people craft the morning well, and then to let the nighttime take care of itself. I feel like it seems like decades working with students. You can work for a long time with someone trying to get the nighttime right, but if the morning isn't right, you'll never get the nighttime right.
yeah, the nighttime is kind of preparation for the morning. So if you don't have any kind of morning demands, then there's nothing to prepare for, and your night's just going to fall apart.
And if you're dreading the morning because you hate the process of waking up and you hate getting out of bed and you keep hitting snooze, and so if the mornings are just painful like that, well, then you keep wanting to put it off, and that means staying up later and later. And so it seems to me that even that's a reason. Like once people grab the morning, like a bull by the horns, and they get used to really like living it well, they're more eager to have good mornings, and so they just naturally tend to go to bed on time. So I just don't feel like I've almost ever had to deal with someone actually getting sleep deprived because they were still staying up super late, even though they fixed the morning wake up time at a good wake up time. So I know that's just been my experience. Focus on the mornings. The nighttime takes care of itself. But with that said, there are like I think maybe this also is possible because I'm usually working with people to try to stop doing all professional work by something like 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. Something early enough to like make their mouth drop when they hear it. They're like, no, there's no way you can get done. But I think once the mornings are supercharged, you have these very productive days, and then you can end early and have a restful dinner, and then the evening is for people. The evening is for friends and family. The evening is for reading and relaxing and enjoyable things. So and then if there's something related to work, but you really enjoy, say, reading this kind of literature, reading and it's kind of work related, but you enjoy it, well, great. I think the evenings are for that kind of thing. But with no pressure, deadlines in the work you're doing in the evening. And that's really the goal. You finish the workday on time, and then you have relaxed evenings. You naturally then tend to go to bed on time, and then you wake up on time.
Well, Kevin, the very cool thing is that we actually got a response to these piece of advice that we gave. So we can actually see how our approach worked out. So I can go ahead and read this follow-up email. So here it is. I wanted to write and thank you at OptimalWork for encouraging the morning flip. After a month of practicing the new schedule, 5 a.m. rise and workout, I've noticed many positive impacts. The most salient is the radical reduction of reluctance to work. This is a lasting effect. Quality of sleep, as you had hinted, also improved. I now wake up on my own, which is surprising to me every time it happens. I'm glad I followed your advice, and despite my doubts at the beginning, I'm now convinced of the effectiveness of this routine.
That's wonderful to hear. Yeah. And it's great to see that the reluctance to work. I think this is a key thing. Like once you get the morning and you really like grab the bull by the horns, it's the idea of like you just really embrace the challenge of the morning, then work is actually much, much easier to enter into because you already have a rhythm of embracing challenge in the day.
And then the person goes on to say, I did think that working out so early would be much worse, but it's actually fun, stimulating, and gets you already warm and positive for the day. You feel the energy flowing a little more. Overall, I would say I'm astonished at how quickly our bodies can adapt to changes and how body and mind seem to need each other to work well. Sometimes we think we are set in our ways and that things cannot be different, but changing is not as difficult as our mental representation of change could be.
That is such a great point. The I think this person is really talking about having overcome the power of a self-fulfilling prophecy. That they've been telling themselves that the mornings are always like the mornings are going to be hard, or I can't work out in the morning. And if you believe that the mornings are tough, you're not a morning person. See, believing you're not a morning person is a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's just never, how is it going to happen then? Unless someone tells you that you don't have to believe that about yourself. How are you going to ever, or you have a job that requires getting up in the morning, which happens to most people. And then after a short time, they realize, that actually wasn't that bad. So it's a fantastic discovery. And I think it'd be great that we talk more about self-fulfilling prophecies because it's really at the heart of what holds people back, I think, from really growing.
So, how would you deal with someone who just like wouldn't wake up in the morning? I mean, do you think it's a kind of precondition for further changes, or is it something that people can do without and just start making progress in other areas?
I think, earlier in my days when I was working with students in a mentoring program, uh, I would jokingly say in the first session that this is basically the requirement for continuing. That you have to be willing to jump out of bed in the morning the moment your alarm first sounds. And I would get them to agree to that. I think I am perhaps just, I don't know, am I a little bit less intense now? Has a little more experience? I'm willing to work with people more on it and to see. And in fact, I never stopped talking to, I never stopped working with them. But it was just my way of saying, this is really important. Because if you could get someone to make that change in the very first mentoring session, it just like was rocket fuel to the whole process of growth. And they experience a huge flip in their whole approach to work in the day. So I think it is hugely important. One of the things I remember someone practicing, and I've mentioned this before here, was before going to bed at night, setting the alarm for like 5 minutes in the future, and then fall asleep, and then the alarm would go off, and he would practice jumping out of bed, and then he would go to bed for real. And he said he did that for a week, and after that, it was easy. And I've had other people come back and write to me or tell me that they had always found it hard. They did that for a few days, and then they were able to do it after that. We get actually very interesting feedback of people saying they had never been able to do this, and now they do it every day. So I feel like we just get a lot of encouraging. And so I think that it's doable. It's not as hard. It's never easier than the very first second you wake up. But the other thing here is trying to see if you need to shift your work early to trust that that is actually a very fine idea. Not that you would necessarily live every day like that, but on intense days, shift and get up earlier. So, and then you'll see that you can have fantastic golden hours early in the morning.
Yeah, I mean, to me, if you're really serious about change and growth, then if you're not currently kind of waking up early and the moment your alarm first sounds, that is your biggest opportunity for growth.
And it's like a gold mine waiting there because you'll find like so many unexpected things, are just the day flows so much better and you get really so much more peace. I mean, people find also that just that kind of regularity in their schedule gives them a sense of peace. Famously, peace is the tranquility of order. So I think that more important, practically than anything, is the regularity of sleep hours. And I'm saying you can adjust it every once in a while if you need to go earlier. It's best though to have regular sleep hours, where you're favoring waking up on the earlier side, and then doing that consistently. And then on weekends you can wake up maybe an hour later or a little bit more, but not too much later. Otherwise, it's harder to fall asleep on Sunday night.
Well, Kevin, we are out of time for today. So I wonder if you have any final thoughts you want to add.
Well, I would love for anyone listening, if you believe you are just not a morning person and can't do it, try some of these strategies and see, could you set your alarm further away? Can you just be ready to jump? Can you practice it at night? Just make yourself totally committed to it and see. I don't think it will take very long at all to see that belief you had was the one thing really that was holding back a whole potential areas of growth in your life. So it's a wonderful thing to address.
Yeah, I completely agree. Waking up early is one of the best decisions I ever made in my life. Great. Well, Kevin, we'll be talking next week then.
All right, Sharif.
Thanks so much
Until
for
then,
joining.
goodbye.
See ya.